Welcome to HSB Flight Park. I'm going to take you to Field of Dreams, which is our primary landing zone. It's about, probably about a mile long. It's just wide open, a mile wide long and 3/4 of a mile wide. And very few obstructions, no trees, little if any rock. It's a fantastic place to land. We do have a structure down there. Apart from our pro shop, we have public structure. It's the transfer station. So we avoid that. And there's some fencing that goes around the transfer station, and then there's some fencing that just goes along the road. So those are the two biggest hazards for setting up at Field of Dreams. The fencing along the road, the fencing along the transfer station, and there's some power lines at the entrance to the flight park and where it meets the road between the transfer station. So here is Field of Dreams. Get you a nice view. You can see it's pretty wide open. There's the road. You can see you're at the base of a valley. So there are times where you could expect strong valley winds. So big things to keep in mind when setting up for this LZ is you don't want to overshoot, because right out here you're going to run into some fencing, but it's long, it's flat, it's grassy. You know, I like setting up my final approach right about here at maybe between 50 to 100 feet, setting up here, and bam, now your final glide will put you right about here. It's perfect. So we have a fantastic LZ. Now, let's head up to our primary launch. This launch is called Ridgemont High. All of our launches and LZs, they're all named after movies, 80s movies themes. So Fast Times at Ridgemont High, a true classic. And here it is. You can see it also faces into the prevailing wind direction, northwest winds. The launch itself is just over a mile long, and it lines up absolutely perfectly. There's a few lumps in here in this terrain, which is actually really fantastic, because it shelters pockets of air, allowing the thermals to get more firmly established. So right about here, I found I can almost always experience a strong source of lift. So we consider this right here. There's some dark black rock that helps trigger things. This is our house thermal. So about a 1.5 mile long ridge, and big, huge open LZ. Big thing with this launch site is do not lay out your wing until you are thinking you are going for it, that you are launching. This is not a place to kite. Given how steep the slope is here, if you're going to pull your wing up over you and you're anywhere near the slope, you're going to get plucked. So bear that in mind. Do not get your wing over your head unless you are ready to send it. Okay, so once again, you have 900 feet between the top and the LZ down at the bottom. It's a very steep pitch, so just about every wing I'm familiar with have a glide ratio that comfortably makes it all the way down to the primary LZ. So big hazards to be aware of, just flying in HSB in general, but particularly this launch site. So you're going to be launching this launch if you have northwest to west-northwest winds. That opens you up for almost 180 degrees. So the primary hazards with Ridgemont is you're going to be flying the site. This site, it's our go-to site. This is a great site to thermal off of. It's an even better site to ridge soar and get our epic glass-offs through. So with the last two in mind, they present some particular hazards. So when it's soarable and when it's totally glassing off, the winds can be strong. The winds can definitely, you can expect winds of at least 12 miles an hour. So just on the cusp of whether or not it's P2 conditions. And the reason it becomes really hazardous with this ridge is it really drops off on this side. That means if you come back here and you're dealing with winds over anything that'll push you back, which would be a minimum of 15, but probably something more like 20 to 30 mile an hour winds pushing you back here, it's going to result in rotor. That's down air. It's going to slap your wing out of the sky. You do not want that. So the mitigation, the prevention is staying upwind at all times. So first thing pilots should focus on is clearance. You launch, get yourself 100 feet between you and the ridge immediately. And then you can start thinking about scratching, really getting a little closer and really adjusting where you want to be based on just how strong it is out there. But I can't stress this enough. Stay in front of the ridge. Okay, now in the event that you launched and it turned on or something, regardless of how it materialized, you launch Ridgemont High and suddenly you find yourself going backwards. You're aimed straight into the wind, you're on speed bar, and you're going backwards. Uh-oh. Okay, this is where our blown over the back procedure comes in handy. This way, you don't even have to think about it. These are your options. You have two of them. Recommendations depend on altitude. Recommendation, if you're over 100 feet above the ridge and you start finding yourself getting blown over the back, run with the wind, go 180 degrees, fly all the way back over all this terrain, all the way over the highway, and you can land in a flat that's just where the highway makes a bit of a dog leg, just that rounded 90-degree turn. There's a nice big flat area here. And as you can see, when we get here, it's right off this runway truck ramp. But you can see that this is also a bit higher too. And that's what I really like about this. That means you are going to be about even with Ridgemont High from all the way back here. Excuse me, I went too far. Yeah, Ridgemont High is right over here. So you're going to be pretty close to even with Ridgemont High. So I feel as though your turbulence will be minimal from here. Now that's if you're 100 feet over. If you're a bit lower than that, okay, back on Ridgemont. Now if you're lower than 100 feet over Ridgemont High and you find yourself getting blown over the back, or potentially blown over the back, and you're lower than 100 feet, I recommend crabbing your way down the ridge until right about here the terrain drops off a little bit. And right at this intersection, you're going to be encountering this confluence of valley winds, unobstructed valley winds flowing along the river, and the winds flowing up and over the terrain. So if from here you can crab your way into these winds over here, these valley winds over the river, they're going to be just a little bit smoother than the winds coming over the top of the terrain. And right back here, you see that we have the high school. There's the baseball field. And if you look to the right, we have the football field. So these are two big areas you could put it down. There are tall lights in the area, so there are upper level hazards to be aware of. But if you're lower than 100 feet, crab your way to the edge of the river, get into some cleaner air, and turn and go. Get over here and turn and face back into the wind. Landing facing this direction, right back at Ridgemont High where you launched from. And I didn't mention it with Ridgemont High earlier, but with our glass-offs, we get powerful glass-offs, and coming down can be a serious issue. So apart from getting blown over the back, what to do when you can't get down? So here you'll find nothing but lift, you know, all along these sun-beaten terrain features. Nothing but lift, all up here. To really truly find sink in this area, you have to fly over or at least above the river. you're going to get much cooler air over here. But the only thing is, you're going to likely be doing this, if it's a glass off, you're going to be doing this in the evening. And that means there will be other drainages and valleys that are going katabatic. So you're going to experience some turbulence, especially because if you look at this terrain feature, it lines up with our prevailing wind. So you could get a little kick off coming over the back of that thing. So when you're at about 300 to 400 feet above Field of Dreams, our primary LZ, between there and Ridgemont High, you will likely experience some turbulence coming in this area. And it could be a little rough. While you're holding big ears, just keep holding them. Ride it out. I recommend just riding it out. It may not be super pleasant, but you know what? When you get below 200 feet AGL, above ground level, and you're right over Field of Dreams, right about here, you'll start feeling smooth air. And that's when it's most important, right? The last 200 feet is what we're really concerned about. So you could set up and have a nice smooth landing. Now the only other thing to be mindful of is, like I said earlier, in the evening you're setting up, especially if the sun is setting or has set, you could very well, in fact, you could almost expect that Ridgemont High, the place you just launched off of, has gone katabatic. That means downslope, down valley winds. So you may find yourself setting up to land. Look at the windsock. Base your decisions off the windsock. You may have to land facing right back into this big terrain feature. Counterintuitive, I know, but soft landings are soft landings.